Hey guys, what's up? So today I'm going to try to do something a little bit straightforward, hopefully. I'm going to look at both the legacy and the X versions of a couple of the neural DSP plugins and see if they sound any different from each other or if there's any measurable difference between their tonalities. And the reason behind this is because, as Neural DSP has released a handful of the X versions of their plugins, with the Nameless and the Soldano being the most recent versions, it dawned on me going on to like Reddit and Facebook and all these places. There's a lot of people who are convinced that, Neural DSP improved the overall tonality of their plugins and that they can hear a difference and that the updates aren't just, the user interface and just the overall feature set that comes with the plugins. And I'll admit that when the Gojira X came out and I downloaded it and I started to play some of my presets, I did feel like there was something different going on with what I was hearing. Like the presets just didn't sound quite the same. And when I went back and did some A/B back and forth, tried to kind of listen, just chugging around on the guitar, I was half convincing myself that I was hearing stuff, but at the same time, it really didn't sound all that different. I think just because it was brand new, it had the new stuff and it looked better. The user interfaces, I think, are hands down a lot better. I was essentially manifesting what I expected there to be in terms of a tonal difference, thinking that this is supposed to be a rollout of a better product or something like that. And I think that happens a bit with products in general. I think pickups are one of the biggest ones that I can think of where a company or somebody who's vested into, the pickup, you start to have expectations about what you're supposed to be hearing and what kind of characteristics are supposed to be, apparent within the product itself. And so honestly, like the first time you get something, whether it be an amp, a guitar, a pickup, a plugin, if you read the marketing and if you read kind of like the description and what other people have said about it, you tend to then take those things and the first thing you do is you plug it in, you start to play, and you're listening for those specific things. Oh, they said it's supposed to be more articulate, more top end, a little bit more clarity. Well, you're going to automatically be listening for things like clarity, top end, articulation of the strings. And to be honest, it takes a lot for somebody to then go, oh man, well that was bullshit. I don't hear any of that. Can't believe I wasted my money. Like a lot of us don't like to go down that route. I would say that's the exception and not the rule. I don't think most things that are sold are just, garbage. So what I did here is I took some DI tracks. They're the same consistent track. I reamped these tracks through both the Gojira Legacy plugin and the X plugin, as well as the Fortin Nameless Legacy plugin and the Fortin Nameless X plugin. So first up, we're going to start with the Gojira plugins. I'm using the Greg Kubacki Car Bomb preset. I think it's A-V or A-5. I don't know what it's supposed to be. But I'm using that same preset, in both plugins, and they're supposed to be identical presets to each other. And so let's go ahead and listen to those back to back. All right, so now that we listen to those back to back, if I'm being totally honest, they sound very similar. They sound almost identical. However, I think the Legacy plugin has a fair bit more of a low end thing going on, especially in the headphones. I'm listening to them back to back and I'm going, man, that Legacy plugin just has a bit more low end going on. And it's almost to the point that it's kind of a little mudded out in the preset. The only other thing I could really pick apart, just listening to them, is maybe there's a little bit of like textural difference in the top end, top mids. Hard to tell. Again, a lot of the times this stuff that we come up with just kind of is our own projection of what we think should be happening. So to actually figure out if anything's really going on here, I'm going to pull up a graph here that shows the output EQs of the process signals for both the legacy and the X plugin. Okay, so here's the graph, and the green line is the legacy plugin, and the kind of pale red line is the Gojira X. And, you know, to be honest, the lion's share of the frequencies, you know, we're looking at like 8K down to about 100 hertz. These are all pretty much lining up. There's a little bit of variation going on here. I mean, it is a little broken up here in the low mids. The mids all the way through here, this is all pretty much identical. There's some very minor tweaks here. And, you know, I'll talk about why I think some of these tweakings might be happening. But the big takeaway, and what I was kind of surprised by, the low end curves are not super matched. The X has this nice little dip, you know, where we have a shelf here, there's a dip here, and there's, you know, that's in that 40 hertz, that real low end. And honestly, this sub 100 area, well, this might not look like a lot, but, you know, we're looking at like about 2 decibels of difference between the X and the legacy in this kind of low area here, which is kind of what I think I was hearing in the headphones, or, you know, that low end kind of meatiness, kind of muddiness. And this especially, whatever's going on here is definitely tightening up the low end, you know, what we're hearing audibly in the mix or in the headphones, I guess. And, you know, even if you were to apply some sort of, you know, high pass filter here, if your cutoff was somewhere in like the 70 hertz range, by the time you curved it down, you'd kind of be intersecting the tail end of this. And it could have a bit of an effect. One thing it does help, though, if you're just going to play, you know, in the room or whatever, that little low end kind of cut here does give a little bit more of a tightness factor. Now, the other interesting thing, going over to the top end here, everything above 10K, there's like some real obvious cuts going on around like this 11.5 to 12K range here, and then right around the 16K range. And to me, those are problem frequencies that I come across a lot. In fact, you know, when I do like a low pass filter, or yeah, I guess it would be a low pass filter, I tend not to have a sharp cutoff. I like to do like a high pass or a low pass shelf kind of thing, and then mess around with like some more surgical cuts up here, because, you know, this is where a lot of the air and the clarity comes from in the guitar sound, and completely cutting it out makes the guitar too dark sometimes. Sometimes you just need certain frequencies to be cut out and others to be let through. So whereas the original curve is a little bit more gradual, and there's obviously some cuts going on, but now with the X, there are actual more drastic dips happening in these high frequencies. So take that for what you will. I think that it implies that there might have actually been a little bit of manipulation going on with the plugin itself. So what I think is really more potentially happening, you know, because I don't think Neural DSP is going back and completely starting from the ground up to reconfigure their captures. What I think, you know, this is all speculation. There's nothing out there to tell me that what I'm about to say is even remotely true. What I think is most likely is there's probably some refinement of the IR section of the plugins. I do think that when I was messing around with some of the IR stuff, I was getting a bit better tracking in terms of like mic position and, you know, moving those things around. I just think, you know, when you have extreme, you know, shifts on the tail ends of the frequency spectrum, that's more likely a factor of things related to the speaker and the mic more than the actual preamp settings on the amp itself. So I think some of those cuts, some of those low and high things, those might actually be baked into the IR captures, even though they're the same setting, using the same IR settings and all that stuff. There's something going on there. So let's move on to the Nameless. And I'm just using a preset that I came up with myself. It's the same DI track, so we'll just listen to those A and B. So to me, listening to the Nameless, they both sound really good. The one thing I might have picked out a little bit, I feel like the new Nameless X, there's a bit more of a clear top end kind of, I don't know if I'd call it like fidelity. And listening to like the palm mute chuggy stuff and some of the more kind of held out chords, I feel like with the Nameless X, I'm hearing a little bit more of that air. It's subtle. I don't know. I'm going to pull up a graph and we can see if there's anything really going on there. So here's the graph for the Nameless. Go ahead and disregard this crossbar. This is a leftover thing for me capturing the photo of the graph. But again, the green line is the legacy amp and the pale red line is the X. And even more so, this is a much better matched up curve. There's even less of this little micro variation going on in the mid-range that we saw on the Gojira. The low end is a much better match, but there's something going on in this like 35 hertz, this really low end here. This dip. I don't know if this is something that they've kind of decided is a necessary cut in the overall structure of their plugins for high gain. I have no clue. I mean, this is interesting that it's like in the same exact area. There's like this little dip because these are completely different plugins. Again, using the same DI. I don't feel like I heard it that much more low end in the legacy Nameless. Maybe a little bit. Now, what's interesting is over here, when you go to the X version of the Nameless, there's a lot more upper like harmonic stuff going on. This, post 10 to 12 to 14 range here. I mean, where there was a dip in the legacy, we now have a bump. And so I think that kind of verifies what I was hearing. I was hearing more of like a top end, I guess I'd call it fidelity. It's just a little bit more fidelity. Again, speculation. I don't know if Neural DSP is intentionally going through and finding out a way to improve certain frequency responses that they didn't like before. And my guess would be that the easiest way to go about that would be to tweak the IRs. So yeah, I think it's interesting that there are some measurable differences. Not so much so that I don't think you would be able to pick any of this out in any kind of mixed context. I think you'd have to be like superhuman to be like, oh my God, I can definitely tell the difference. I think the lion's share of the frequency data that I'm seeing is mostly matched up in the audible range and in the range of stuff that actually matters to like high gain guitar. I think what has been either altered or added has been an improvement. I do think that Gojira low end woofiness that kind of was present in some of those presets. I don't think you'll have to kind of work as hard to dial those out using the post EQ. It is cool now that the Nameless has a post EQ. I haven't even gotten a chance to dive into that and utilize that, because the original Nameless didn't have that. I'm excited to kind of go through and see what I can do with some of my tones to make them, hopefully better. But overall, I think, the debate that has been kind of trickling in online about whether or not Neural DSP is really altering the core tones of these amps, I think it's answerable that, yeah, they have to be doing something to some portion of their plugins to get such a discrepancy in some of these frequency ranges, but they're not really altering the characteristic of these amps to the point that you're getting something totally different from the original. Now, as a consumer, when you go to buy one of these plugins, you're automatically going to get the X version. If you are a legacy customer, somebody who's already had those, you're going to have both versions at your disposal, which is cool because I think there's some presets that might actually benefit from some of the older tonality. Again, this isn't a comprehensive thing. I literally picked 2 presets between the 2 amps, and I was just curious to see if there was anything different. So hopefully you got something out of this, and hopefully it makes sense what I tried to do here. Let me know in the comments what you think. If you own neural DSP stuff and you've experienced something, you know, akin to there being some like big shift in tone, let me know, because I'd like to go through and kind of suss out, you know, what those look like and what you could actually expect when it comes to like these plugins and some of these updates. Anyway, that's my spiel. Later.